Hey everyone, it's Mark Zolinsky and welcome to Pannilore. Yeah, it's time. I'm always joined by my trusty co-host, Wiki Dave. How's it going, Wiki Dave?
I'm very, very tired. It's 6 a.m. on a Sunday of all the days that you could have picked. But yeah, Sunday. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine.
Well, it's all worth it because we have a very special guest today, Mr. Ben Stoddard. How's it going today, Ben?
It's going great. It's only Saturday morning for us, so it's fine.
Oh,
Bloody Americans, man.
Yeah, it's Saturday. What afternoon? 1:13 p.m. for me.
I know. I set all this up. You don't need to rub it in. Jeez.
Yeah, well, you know how it goes, Dave. But hey, now you get me every once in a while too. So I've done the 4 or 5 o'clock a.m. shift before. So
yeah, no.
Yeah, I know. We get it. But we're not here to moan and complain about time zones, though. We're here to talk.
I am.
We're here to talk about, the fabulous stuff coming out of Wing to Star Publishing, 4th edition, and Ben. So, it's great. And I love having Ben here on the show. Ben was actually my cohort in crime back over on Countercharge when we did the narrative workshop. That was quite a while ago.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, we actually got it started. So it was great and had a good time. And as an outgrowth of that, actually, Ben, you kind of got into the writing aspect of Kings of War. So why don't we go ahead and start that with a little bit of Ben Stoddard background and kind of drift into our conversation for today.
Yeah. Actually, before we dive too much into it, I should just give people a little bit of insight for that haven't been around. So Ben has written 2 other books in the past before The Argument of Stone. The very first one, which Mark was hinting at, was Drowned Secrets. And if you actually got Drowned Secrets, you'll notice Mark's name right at the beginning of it, as a little bit of a forward. So that's why this little meeting is actually quite special for the both of them, because they both have come very far since that. So that's just a little bit of context for those out there that are wondering what Mark was hinting at. But yeah, Ben, I guess start with Drowned Secrets. How did that come about?
So Drowned Secrets was it was actually a project that Mark and I were working on called the Countercharge Journal. I believe that was what we were going to call it, that we were working through.
Oh yeah, first issue is still up on the Wing to Star publishing website. You can still download it for free.
Yep. And actually the prologue for Drowned Secrets was the story that I wrote for that. And I was just like, I could take this somewhere. And at the time we just heard about Wing to Star taking, pitches and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, what the heck? I'll just send that over. And it was great because it was like perfect, destiny kind of feeling to it. Is on the day of it was on my birthday. I remember. I don't remember which birthday it would have been, but I could do math and figure it out. But it was on my birthday. I got an email from Brandon saying, "Hey, we like what you sent us. We'd like to see about developing this into a novel. Could you come up with an outline for what that novel would look like? And we'll go through the process of developing this into a novel." And I was just like, that was a bucket list item for me to get a book published. And I was like, yeah, awesome, great birthday present, woohoo. But it was because of all the stuff that we'd done with the narrative workshop that that's what got my name out there. The community was vaguely probably aware of me at that point. And so it was just kind of worked out like that. And so I used the short story that I'd written for the Countercharge Journal. I had to take it out and be like, sorry, guys, I can't use this anymore. I wrote a second one that I then submitted that's still on that Countercharge Journal about the Brotherhood, which is ironic for other reasons. And then took that prologue and turned it into, took that short story, turned it into the prologue for Drowned Secrets, took the main character from that short story, Ashal is this kind of the main character, Ashal, and I turned her into the main character of the novel and developed that into a whole thing of like what would happen after the short story.
Interesting. So, and the cover doesn't really do the book too much justice because it's not really about the Trident Realm and what's going on there. It's more about like Trident Realm characters out of the element. So actually, carrying on from that, is that book kind of have led to you writing now the 4th edition lore for the Trident Realm. I know, obviously we have to be very careful here. We can't go into too many spoilers. Yes, this is coming out early November, but when the book is actually in everyone's hands, we don't know. It's going to vary. So,
yep.
How did that come out? Did that come directly because of Drowned Secrets, or was that just something you just put your hand up for Mantic and you just combine those two things together?
Getting into a position where Mantic approached me to start writing on this thing, Drowned Secrets, I think, is probably the biggest reason why they did. We never sat down and said, like, this is why you're getting it. But it was mentioned that, you know, my book's the only one that even has Trident Realm characters that I'm aware of.
I think in Nature's Night, some of the characters from Drowned Secrets are in there, but that's
ironically
much the extent
Tales of Mantica too has got some Trident Realm in it.
Yes,
the short story. Yep.
Funny stories about both of those. You mentioned Nature's Night. That one was actually the second project that I worked on for Winged Hussar, because that was a 4-author thing, and and so the Drowned Secrets characters that are in that, and there's also, if you pay real close attention, there's some Faith Aligned from Mark Barber that are also in Nature's Night. That was their first appearance, and then they become bigger characters in the following subsequent novels by Mark. But and so so Nature's Night does have Sheshra, who's also from Drowned Secrets, and it's after that.
Yeah, it's like 3 years, because if memory serves me right, this is me getting all wiki on you. I think Drowned Secrets takes place just before the Edge of the Abyss event, so it's like 3,850, and then what?
It'd be just after, because there is a reference in Drowned Secrets too, because Ashal and Magdalene fought on the Ardovikian plains during the Edge of the Abyss, because it talks about them being there when Darvaled does his little speech at the top of the wall. She has a little bit of a flashback to it.
But in Drowned Secrets, the two main characters are in the Harpy Mountains originally. They're in Marn.
Yes, they are.
But Harpy Mountains would have been taken over by...
Exactly. That was something that should have been retconned and wasn't, and got through the first thing. So there's a little bit of early...
Well,
that's how I timelined the stories, because of that particular thing.
Yep.
Dave,
it was something that...
all of us doing time. It's like, he was reading the short story. It's like, oh, hold it. He's ordering them by time. It's like, Dave.
Yeah. It was the problem with the first of all of this, which is why it's been so great that Mantic and Winged Hussar are now working a lot closer with it.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that was like, we're kind of, it's already in production, so we'll figure it out as we go. So there is a little bit.
This is how you get around it. They got on the boat just before the Edge of the Abyss. The boat ride took a long time, and by the time they got to the other side, it was done. Yeah. Yep. There we go.
Toss in a magical portal and we're all good.
Yep.
Yes.
What honestly should have happened is we should have switched it from being in the Halpy Mountains to being in Estakar, and they just sailed across, honestly, is what really should have happened. But it was a detail that wasn't super clear to us at the time, because I started writing it just before Edge of the Abyss became like fully fleshed out. And then by the time I had finished, it had been, and there was a lot of things that we had to change, such as if you notice this also in Tales of Mantic, or the Edge of the Abyss short stories, the Trident Realm story has a male naiad as the main character, which is not possible because all naiads are female. Like, that's something that Mantic has come up and said.
I think they should go Kalon. I don't know Kalon. There's a species in the Orville where they say it's a predominantly male species all the time, but there are random females that actually are born. Not Kalon.
Yeah, the Mocklins.
The Mocklins, that's it.
Mocklins,
You could do it. Could easily be something like that, but instead of them being shamed, they're actually just integrated in society and so forth. So there is a possibility you can narratively make that make sense as well, because they, at the end of the day, the Naiads are a race that was created by the Wicked Ones based off other races that existed in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is a narrative possibility you could somehow weave that in. I'm just saying.
That being said, I could see Dark Smith kind of doing it as like a cruel trick almost, is like, haha, I'm going to create this species and you've got to figure out how you're going to reproduce or something along those lines, which leads to all the trickery that the Naiads have. That definitely feels in keeping with the Dark Smith or Dark Chiron's kind of like machinations that he had. So I could definitely see that as well. But I also see where you're coming from. In fact, in the original draft of Drowned Secrets, Elaine, who is Ashal's mother, was originally her father. And once Mantic came forward and said that, hey, by the way, they're all like, we had finished the entire first draft when we were going through edits when they released that bit of information. We're like, oh, well, let's go back and fix everything then. And so that was a change. We're like, oh, okay, let's we've got some adjustments to make. So the first few books of the Winged Hussar novels were kind of like they were very formative kind of thing. And just like in everybody's formative years, mistakes are made, right? That's when you should make them. And so, yeah, there's some things that might not quite jive. Now we're getting more into the groove and we've got a little bit better idea of when things are happening. We have a specific timeline and all that kind of stuff. And we're far more organized as far as like how to organize things, how to make sure things are happening in the right order and all that kind of stuff.
And it also shows how much the franchise has grown from where it started. And talking about things that don't make too much sense, let's go into Pride of the King, flowing on. Mainly, I bring that up just because of the Harpy's Rift and Pride of the King. Kind of, there's a little bit of disconnection of some of those events taking place during Pride of the King and so forth. And I guess talk about how you got started with Pride of the King and also some of the challenges that came out of, some of that disconnection, because, if people were reading Pride of the King and also following what was happening on the table with Mantic, some of the events don't really make sense because of that disconnection.
Yeah, so Pride of the King came about because, and I've told this story before, but Pride of the King came about because it was right after Drowned Secrets had either come out or was about to come out, and Mantic was right in the throes of COVID, and so Mantic was like, well, we need to do something to kind of keep things going with everybody, and so they had Winged Hussar call up all of their authors that they wanted to be using and all of that kind of stuff, and plus some other movers and shakers within the Mantic community, like the names of the game developers and all that kind of stuff. And we all got together on this big old phone call where they said, this is where we want the story to go. These are some things that we would like. And then they gave us like this huge long Word document full of all these ideas of these are things that we'd like to see covered and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things on there was a couple things that stuck out to me. One of them was we would like to see a murder mystery. And I was like, ooh, that could be fun. That could be interesting. And then they're also like, we also need someone to tackle a dwarf novel within the near future, because that was such a dedicated fan base. I mean, it doesn't matter which fantasy genre you go with. Dwarves are a big part of that. And so they're like, we want to do a dwarf thing. I'm like, well, it could be interesting to do that. I've got an idea. And then they hit at a certain big betrayal, and I was like, I wouldn't mind covering that. I think that could be fun and make it an important novel. So why not? I submitted an idea to Brandon, and he was like, I'm intrigued. Let's send it on.
Oh, did we lose Ben?
Oh, I thought I froze because I didn't see you do anything. And we just had a little jump there. This is actually we're recording this bit of the podcast about a week later because Ben's internet froze out during the recording. So we're just going to continue the conversation the best we can remember it. And unfortunately, Mark is no longer here because of time zone stuff. Even though I'm pretty sure Ben and him are in the same time zone, I think he's doing something else on a Sunday. Anyway, so the last thing you mentioned was submitting the idea to Brandon. So you got the idea about this betrayal that was a storyline that was, and then you submitted the idea. So how did it go from there? Was it just intended to be one book, or was it always intended to be a 3-parter?
So when I first conceived of the idea, it was kind of like a one book attempt, and then after that, it kind of grew as I started writing. I'm like, this is a lot to put into one story, and there's no way that I'm going to get to a resolution in a timely manner that makes it feel like it's a safe thing. And so we just kind of, that's my kids in the background. Sorry about that.
They're going to be on a podcast, so it's their own fault.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But as I was writing through Pride of a King, it got to the point where I was like, there's no way that we're going to be able to get all this into one book. And so then I was like, maybe we'll make it a duology. And then as we started going with it, it kind of evolved into like, let's make it a full-on trilogy, because there's all these things that we need to put into this, and all of these story arcs and all these things that are going to be going at it. And if we can make it into a trilogy, I'd much rather do that. It is going to be a hard stop at the trilogy, though. I'm not going to keep the series going indefinitely, kind of thing. So,
yeah, the 17th book in the War of Stone trilogy.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. Not doing that.
Nah, fair enough. I like that. I like having a plan and having a I think, a lot of people complain about sequel on sequel on sequel, or like, and that's why people like British TV. They like British because it finishes.
Yeah,
they have a clear end stop. Or they just make it up as they go along, and then we get Doctor Who. But either way, it's good that we do have, this really cool story that's being told. And I guess this is something, because obviously we only know one part of it. We don't know how the rest of it's going. For clarity's sake, I do know a little bit what happens in the next book, so I'm trying very careful to not reveal anything that I shouldn't reveal. I'm being very, very quiet about it because Brandon would murder me, and so would Ben. But ultimately, how much of the plot was you and Brandon, and how much was the Mantic directive of where you wanted to go? Because clearly, we can talk about. This is a review of the sequel to Pride of the King. So we can talk about Pride of the King, or being Golic is obviously bad. He's indicating that he's maybe an abyssal dwarf, or at least he's been leaning that way. How much of that was you, and how much was Mantic?
So the Golic decision itself was like, somebody once described it as the worst kept secret in Mantic. But at the same time, like, I had already assumed that's the direction we were going, and I just kind of pitched it to them. Outside of that, though, like Rawson, his wife, that was me. Most of the whole thing, like the characters that were chosen to include in it, that was all me. For the most part, they did say that. I think they said that they wanted Bannock to be in it, and they wanted to use the named characters, and they wanted to use at least a certain amount of these named characters. I was like, cool, I'll play with as many as I can, and we'll put those all together, and we'll give them some identity and all that kind of stuff. And so for that part, the plot is, I would say, 90 to 95% me and 5% directed by Mantic. They were very free with, like, I had to check everything with them, and so they had a hand in it. They cleared everything instead of just saying go hog wild and do whatever you want. I had to clear everything with them. And every time I was like, hey, here's my outline. Here's what I'm going. Hey, I just decided to put this revelation in there with the, with this character or something along those lines, or this development that I wanted to give. And I have to clear that with them with everything. So Mantic signed off on everything. But for the most part, they were just like, hey, we like where you're going. Keep going. See if, and when you have any ideas, make sure you run them through us before you put it into the book, essentially. So.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think. I always use a Lord of the Rings analogy, because one, I'm a New Zealander, and two, it's fantasy. Is you got told that Frodo throws the ring in Mount Doom at the end, but you're filling in the journey. and you're working all that out, which can have actually repercussions going into fourth edition and in the future as well. So I guess when you propose this, I think, if memory serves me right, that was during the third edition, or was it second edition that the book was proposed?
Let's see. That would have been.
I was trying to think how much in advance you would have known about fourth edition and where they were going to go with it.
When did fourth edition come out? It was like 2020.
Well, fourth edition hasn't come out yet.
Or third edition. Numbers, they're fine.
I know.
Anyway.
My OCD wouldn't allow me to let that slide.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, the third edition came out in, I think it's 2020 or 2019. I think it was announced in November 2019, and then they actually, most people got their hands on it in 2020, because it's about a 5-year cycle the editions typically go in. So, I mean, I don't think you would have known about this invasion idea or what they were going to do on theory. But
yeah, so when I first proposed Pride of a King, no, I didn't know anything about the Zerkali or any of that kind of stuff. That was all still very hush hush at Mantic, and they hadn't. I wasn't, involved
in the
inner circle. In the inner circle. Yes, I hadn't sworn my vows, gotten my hooded robe, and all that kind of stuff.
NDA'd. You probably were NDA'd at that time.
Oh no, yes, I was definitely NDA'd at that point.
Yeah,
I've been there, but they still hadn't quite decided how in depth we were going to be involved with the books and the lore of the game.
That's fair.
And so I didn't know as much about that. There were definitely already development ideas, and shortly after, I started going into it, there were some interesting things. One behind the scenes thing is when they were releasing Halpi's Rift, I was like, oh, there's some stuff there that kind of goes against what was in the book, and it was they were just about concurrently almost released, if I remember right. They were pretty close to being at about the same time. And so I just reached out to Matt and I was like, hey, this is something Brandon and I both did. This is something that's in the novel, and if that's the case, it kind of goes against what you're saying here. And so they're like, okay, we'll rearrange things, because they were kind of vague in Halpi's Rift, and then they clarified on their website, it wasn't all the dwarf holds that the Free Dwarfs had reclaimed and all that kind of stuff, because Pride of the King takes place just after Halpi's Rift kind of thing. So it's like Halpi's Rift happens, Pride of the King happens.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Harpy's Rift. I keep confusing it with Edge of the Abyss. No, Edge of the Abyss, and then 10 years later, Harpy's Rift happens. So, actually putting on that, and obviously, I will censor this, because I do the editing on this episode. I will censor it if I'm not allowed to say this. So Ben can say it's a yay or nay on this. But the argument of Stone does connect the tissue there a little bit.
Yes.
It does kind of, because one of the things when you read Pride of the King, and being a lore buff, and I was really just dissecting all the lore. So when I was reading Pride of the King, I read Harpy's Rift. I'm like, this apparently takes place at the same time, yet they're not. It doesn't really make sense. But Argument Stone kind of just fixes that. Was that something that you really wanted to do, your conscious effort to do, or was it just more of a case of the only way to make this fit is to get this in there, and because I think you've done a really good job with sliding it all together.
That was definitely a conscious effort, because Halpi's Rift was developed independently of Pride of the King. And so when they came out, there was we had conversations with Matt, we had conversations with Mantic and all that kind of stuff, but inevitably when they're two separate projects dealing with pretty close things, there's going to be some missed communication where we're kind of kept in isolation and not allowed to necessarily talk to each other, or not able to talk to each other. And so with Argument of Stone, I definitely wanted to bring in some of that connective tissue and make it so that it fit closer to cementing it where it was in the timeline. On top of that, the timeline itself wasn't cemented until after Pride of the King was finished. The timeline that we have at the very beginning of Pride of the King is still not the final one that came out shortly thereafter. once that one came out. And so once we had that a little bit more solidified with Argument of Stone, we were able to make sure, okay, this fits here, let's put this all together and make it all kind of come and fit, essentially.
And I think that's something that I've really noticed having these interviews about 4th edition lore and looking at the 4th edition lore. The cohesion is so much more than it used to be. I mean, I've only really been heavy into the community of the lore side of things of Pannithor for a short while, and you can really see the difference between that early 2nd edition and the even 3rd edition and what's hitting into 4th edition. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but it's clearly showing the authors and the writing and the novels and what's actually happening on the table. It feels like more of a franchise now than just books written about a game, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm so excited about. So I guess, you know, I'm assuming you haven't written the 3rd one yet, or at least you're writing the 3rd one. Do you know, is there, how much connective tissue is there with that 4th edition storyline that you know of? It, you know, are you kind of leaving the dwarves in a particular place that the 4th edition kind of dwarven storyline can take it from there, or is it kind of like that bit is still a little bit blurry there?
So I will say you will want to read this trilogy if you're invested in the dwarves and where they're going in 4th edition. That's pretty much all you can say.
Pretty
much what I want. There is connection, yes, because, and this is the general idea that I have, is that the final novel of the book will basically take place at the end of 3rd edition. So like the novel trilogy will conclude, and then 4th edition starts like right there, right? So we got Argument of Stone, or we got Pride of a King, Argument of Stone, TBA, 4th edition, like right after it. So
yeah, they haven't specified exactly when 4th edition takes place, but based off the short stories that have been released, I think it's around 3,870. And for context, Argument of Stone, Pride of the King takes place in 3,866. So it's about 4 years between that, which makes sense. It kind of would fall into, but could have happened a year before, you know, 69.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, we'll find out, but yeah, that works really well. I really love that. I love the idea people can go back and read this history of the dwarfs, and the Mantic dwarfs are really starting to establish their own identity. I think that's so hard to do in fantasy, is with, you know, the typical dwarfs and elves and humans. Like, how do you make your own identity in a fantasy kind of genre that is so flooded with different interpretations? And I think having the dwarfs, free dwarfs dynamic, I think is really, really good. I think the abyssal dwarfs as well is definitely different than chaos dwarfs or you know, other dwarfs we've seen in the past. Is it feels like the dwarfs in this world are more cosmetic. Like, you know, the only difference between a free dwarf and a dwarf is really kind of like where they live. Like, there's certain cultural things that are a little bit different. But I mean, a free dwarf can become an abyssal dwarf, and an abyssal dwarf technically could revert back to a dwarf, as we've seen in some cases, such as what's that champions, that Northern Alliance champion, who secretly are an abyssal dwarf, because it's revealed.
He's the Northern Alliance one. Yeah. I forget his name.
Yeah, it's Northern Lights. So you can they really switch around. So like when you see a character, you could see him journeying to do all these different areas, and there's so much possibility for that. And I think that's so different, and it's a good way of standing out from the crowd, I reckon.
Yeah, the whole idea with the dwarves, and just as a little side note going off of what you said there, the whole idea with the dwarves now, my thought process is, like, when we were starting out, we wanted to build this whole identity. And part of the identity that we've established now, or at least that I am trying to include now, is that I wanted to make dwarves a more intimate kind of race, meaning that it's almost like familial, strong emphasis on like familial bonds and tradition and all those kind of things that are part of like all the other ones, like your classic, you know, Tolkien and GW dwarves and all that kind of stuff that everybody kind of associates with it. But it's also kind of sterile and like far away with those dwarves. And I wanted to take it and make it more like, well, what would that actually look like, right? What would that feel like, right? How awkward is Thanksgiving dinner when all the dwarves get together, kind of thing. and that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I also like the idea of, because we've seen this kind of like free dwarf, abyssal dwarf kind of conversion, you could say. It also opens the door of other dwarfs in the world, because I mean, dwarfs have been around. They're one of the noble races. They've been around for thousands of years, and there is no rule to say they only were in this part of the world. We could have jungle dwarfs somewhere, down south, or something going on of a totally different culture, and it could be like dwarfs and orcs just getting along, and there's like a subfaction of dwarfs and orcs. There's so many, and yeah, there's so many good possibilities that I'm really excited to see where we can go with the dwarfs. And I guess we'll jump into this book, because now I'm talking about, there's a few things in this book that I'm like, I really want to mention that, but I won't. Especially when I was talking about factions and different clans and stuff, and that will make sense for anyone that eventually reads the book of the integration of certain factions. But I guess the best way, I as I said, I've previewed the book, and the best description I can have is it definitely has a Two Towers kind of feel, of that there's a lot of conflict, a lot of moving parts. The story doesn't necessarily end, but there's so much significant stuff in it that if you took it out, it wouldn't make sense. If you went if you watched the Fellowship of the Ring, then went to Return of the King, you'll be very, very confused. Ultimately. But the Two Towers, there's so much. There's one particular thing I really want to mention. Obviously, I can't mention, and I think Ben will know the particular serious thing that happens in the book. So I'll leave it to you, Ben. Sell us the book. Come on. Well, if you were going to describe the book for someone that has read Pride of the King and someone that loves Mantic, how would you sell it, assuming they've already read Pride of the King?
Okay. Well, if you've already read Pride of the King, if you haven't read Pride of the King, go read it. It's a good setup. The thing with Argument of Stone is that there is a lot of world building in Pride of the King. Not to say that there isn't an Argument of Stone, but in Pride of the King, we were establishing, it was the first time we'd really seen the dwarves up close, whereas Argument of Stone now, we can really get going into the nitty-gritty. We can actually, like, we started the conversation in Pride of the King. Argument of Stone is where we can that was like your 101 class. This is now, let's get into the real fun aspects, like the real meat and potatoes of what a dwarf is and all of these things. And on top of that, do those things need to change in any way, right? One thing this is another thing that kind of sets Mantic dwarves apart from everything else, is all the other renditions of dwarves is maybe one or two an individual might change, but like as a society, the dwarves are kind of stuck in this stasis of like nothing ever changes, and yet they're supposed to be one of the most technologically advanced. How do they get there? And then just kind of decide, this is it, this is the pinnacle, the gunpowder, that's it, we're not going any further than that kind of thing. And so like looking at that with them, that's from a societal standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I feel like where there was a lot of emotional punches in Pride of the King, Argument of Stone, I think, takes that up quite a bit. I feel like there's a lot of intimate, like personal moments with the characters in that, and you get to know characters, some of them that you didn't get to know as well because they were hiding secrets or something along those lines, and so you didn't get to know them as well. Some of them you did get a chance to see them, and now you're taking that deeper. Some of the point of view characters have changed up, right? Garrick, for example, is a point of view character in this book, and so he's been a pretty standard dwarf. He's been in it since first edition, right? He was one of the original dwarf named characters.
He was before first edition. He was in the Mantic Journal, number 2. I mean, he was before that.
Yeah, and he kind of represents a little bit of this old guard way of thinking in many ways, even though he is an outcast of it, which we established in Pride of the King. And so we get to see a little bit more of someone who is forcibly outside of the society, whereas Bannock was self-imposed exile to a certain extent. Garrick is very much so no, this is something that is totally not his fault, but by the standard of the dwarves, he's still an outsider, even though he is probably one of the most heroic characters in Pannithor, in all of Kings of War kind of thing. He's one of the ones that's known across the globe, essentially, or across all the noble races, and even the evil, wicked races know him and are kind of like, oof, he's a boogeyman kind of thing. And so we get to we get to see a little bit more of him. We get to see a little bit more of Rorden, who is another character that we haven't seen developed very much outside of like Dungeon Saga, which happens long before the current era, you might say, like a couple decades before kind of thing. And we get to see kind of how he interacts with the dwarves and his way of thinking and how all that works together. And so just all of these kind of different themes coming together. We get to see how it ties together with Halpi's Rift and the world lore that there is. And just ultimately, it is a fun story. I think it's a fun story. It sets up some really cool lore pieces. I'll just say it now, feral golems, right? That's a fun thing. And that's something that definitely plays into it. But lots of cool bits of lore that you could build stuff around. And then on top of that, we have actual dwarf clans that have been named, and heraldry and color schemes and all those things for all of those of you out there that are like, I need my hold. I need my hold that I can build my army around. Well, here you go. And on top of that, I think that this book has the most player shout outs of like player character army cameos of almost any novel that we've written to this point, including a fairly extensive cameo that actually just isn't even a cameo. It's a full-on part from Mendeleev and Mimir, who were player-created characters that someone said, hey, I'd really like for them to show up in this book. And I was like, man, that really fits. Hey, I reached out to Erasmus over, I think he's in Canada, I want to say. And I said, hey, I really like your characters. Would you be okay? Like, I'll clear everything with you, but I would like to see them actually have a slightly bigger part in this book. And so a lot of community participation involved in this. So between all the different clans that people submitted, I hope I got them all. I might have missed a couple, and I apologize for that if that is the case. If you sent your information to me and your characters didn't make it into the book, send it to me again after you read this one. I will make sure they get in the third one, because there's still plenty of room for those guys to show up. So
yeah, and the characters you were just talking about were actually in Pride of the King originally.
Yes, they were.
So they were in Pride of the King. They just got a bigger part now, and I believe they're Fool's Gold. I think it's the hold's name, if memory serves me right. I'm doing that.
Fool's Hold.
Oh,
so play on
sorry,
Fool's Hold, but they because they mine pyrite, which is Fool's.
Yeah,
Hold,
that's right, pyrite, and they were at the Cleanse Wield. Cleansville? That's how you say it, right? Cleansville, sorry. And they were trying to, I think, propose, because they're right onto the east, I think. They're an eastern
way down.
Hold, and so the way out of it. So I think they were just trying to get some, trying to get in there, trying to become one of those higher clans. I guess going into that, there is this hierarchy that we now know within Dwarf society about a major clan and a minor clan. Do you dive a lot into that major clan, minor clan kind of spiel? Because we don't really know who all the major clans are. We know a few. No. Ashtel is one of them. But do you really dive too much into that on the book?
We do introduce a few of them, but I definitely wanted to do the whole, 2 lost chapters like the Space Marines kind of do, TM, all that kind of stuff. GW, don't sue, please. But but I wanted to create enough guidelines that these are some established clans that exist within the universe, but also I'm never going to define all of them, and I hope Mantic never does either, because I want people to be able to say, no, mine's one of the major clans, and they don't even bother numbering necessarily the minor clans or saying that you can't become a minor clan. Just because that can be a real easy way to build your lore into it, is that they're a minor clan. And so if it's like your side army, or you want to say that they're on an outpost or something along those lines, or if you want to build a grand army, you can call them a major clan and build it your own way. And sure, that fits. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of Mantic lore, of Kings of War lore, is that yes, there's going to be some more established things going forward with the lore, but there's always going to be room for you to create your own piece of Pannithor to make it your own and build it the way you are. In fact, there's even some player armies in there that are included. There's like a halfling dwarf like confederacy that has come together. That was a player, I forget the name off the top of my head, but that was a player suggestion. I'm like, hey, that's crazy. I don't know how that would work, but we'll include it because we want that kind of stuff to exist and those possibilities to exist within the lore. So
yeah, that was one of the ones I was alluding to earlier, because I don't want to spoil anything. If you spoil it, it's fine, but I want to be safe on that. But yeah, I believe it's something Confederacy. I can't remember the exact. I think it's
I can't remember enough.
I want to say Green's in there.
Yeah.
But it's basically the halflings that left the league, which would have happened right when this is occurring, the story, in terms of the storyline, because they left the league in the same year that this takes place, or at least the end of Pride of the King takes place.
Yeah.
So they would have left and then headed east and then merged with a dwarven clan, or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. I like this idea of the halfling, because you always get dwarf and halflings, orcs, goblins kind of deal, and this is the first time we've actually seen that in a Mantic world, of that kind of coalition, because halflings are very, very much different than dwarfs. So seeing what kind of culture that will be, because we're going to be seeing a halfling elf culture with the EJ halflings in the new book, so we could just start to see a little bit of how different races kind of merge together. I think that's a really cool. I think that's a really cool interpretation of that. Yeah, I think you're exactly right in terms of what we could be seeing now. For those out there that are wanting to really, really catch up on a few things with Royden, I think Royden's the first one that I actually wrote the full bio for on the wiki. I think it's a very, very long. It counts all the Dungeon Saga stuff, and you can really catch up with Royden's story, including what happens in Pride of the King, and you can really dive into it. But Royden is one of those ones that it's one of the Fab Four, as I call it, the one that's been around for a while, that we really would want to see more, because he is the nephew of the king, and not enough has been done there. And we do know Golak initially wanted to protect the world, and that's why he sent Royden into the dungeon to stop the undead from rising. So seeing a little bit more of that developed after all these years. There's never been an established date of when the Dungeon Saga stuff actually happens. So he is essentially famous, so a few years has happened after that. But I'm really glad that you did mention Royden being there quite significantly, because he's a really great character, and it's one of those characters that I would say is a legacy character in Pannithor lore. It's one of those characters that have been around for a while, that's got a really good story behind him, that we don't know how it's going to end. It's just going to keep going until it doesn't. But I will disagree with the major and minor clans thing for me personally. I think the major clans helps establish what dwarven culture is like. Of the ones that are major clans, they're the ones that are kind of setting the feel of a dwarven culture. That's how at least I've interpreted it. So I've got 7 clans that are more warfaring. You're going to have the dwarven society as a whole being a little bit warfaring. But if they're a little bit more peaceful, and the whole society will be peaceful as well. So I don't know. I think establishing them would be an interesting way of telling the dwarven story over time as well. Over the years that these dwarfs existed or will exist, you can see the change in the dwarven society based off who the major clans are. And just because the major clan stops being one doesn't mean they'd stop existing. They could just get demoted. So I don't know, different perspective on that one. I think they should establish them.
Yeah.
But, and I would also mention, Ben, you've sent me the colors, your color scheme for some of the clans, such as the Ash Tails. We did that with the Pride of the King. That's on the wiki for those that are interested. And I'll leave it to you to mention which ones you've given me already. But I will be loading the ones that you've given me that come out of the new book as well for the color schemes.
Yes.
So.
So yeah, there's a couple of them to look at, and honestly, big shout out to Billy Smith that painted the models that I also sent you with like examples of them. He did all of that. And we wanted to put together something way back when we were doing Pride of the King, because it was something that we could like look at and be like, yeah, let's put this out there. It'll look really cool, and people can maybe base their color schemes off of it.
Yeah,
please go look at them on the wiki. He did an excellent job. They look really cool, and there's definitely more to come. Yeah, so there's
I'll put the Ashtail one up. There you go.
Yep, that's the Ashtail clan one. Great one. I just told them, hey, this is their thing, an anvil in the shape of a fist with a hammer coming down on it. That's the Ashtail clan heraldry, and they're black with like a white to just kind of set them up, kind of thing. And that's a fun thing to be able to see. I'll go ahead and say that one of the major players in Pride of a King is the Athalans clan, which is blue and white, and they're an important part of this story that is coming up. So you will want to know them and maybe have a picture of them in your head.
I'm trying to find a picture now to see where I can put it up really quickly, but I can't see it in the background. I don't know where I've stored it because it was a secret, so I put it in a secret folder so I
wouldn't be tempted. No, go check out on the wiki so you can see them. Hopefully not all the information gets put out for them at the very beginning because there's some interesting stuff about them, but you can see what they look like.
Yeah,
maybe
do embargo for 6 months. I make a general rule for the wiki of I put character lists there. So if you can look up the clans and all that stuff, and it's very kind of like this page to it, and see the symbol. You can see the symbols there. It's not going to go into the bios until a good 6 months out. I think from 6 months, that's when we can discuss the spoilers, and I'm hoping to invite Ben back on, and we can have a deep dive spoiler talk about Argumentless Stone. I think that's going to be really cool. But yeah, we do embargo it. So if you do actually want to know what happens, and there is, I swear to this on the lore side of it, there is some very significant stuff that happens in here that I didn't think they would do, especially this early on in the lore cycle. So yeah, I'm very surprised, and I think everyone should definitely look it up because I can't wait for people to find out what's happened and see how everyone reacts to it. Because there's also the last two words of the book will surprise a lot of people.
Yes,
I will say that too.
It sets up some very. The third book's going to be is going to be. I love that you compared it to Two Towers, and I would love for this one to be the Return of the King kind of thing, where it is going to be all the epic scenes, like all the things that you've been salivating to see between a battle between dwarves and abyssal dwarves and all of that kind of stuff, and just hoping that it comes out, all the cool models on the tabletop and all that kind of stuff, but also all the characters that we're building up towards, right? You're going to see all the characters come out to play. Well, most of the characters come out to play because obviously we can't get to them all. There's just such a huge cast. So all the characters might be a bit much, but most of the characters, whatever characters I can make fit in the story, and it's gonna be an epic conclusion to the trilogy, and hopefully a satisfying one.
And Return of the King is very apt. Kind of mentioned to that now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it's a very well chosen comparison. Let's just say that. So I'll let people dissect that. But I think what was fascinating, because I mean, just going back to what you said before of using so many characters that already had been established by Mantic and also being able to be played on the table. We've got Sevi, you've got Bannock, you've got obviously you got Royden, you've got Garrick. In this book, you've got a couple more as well. We're not going to mention them because that gets a little bit spoilery as well. But the fact that you're using all these really, long-term established legacy characters that don't really have a lot of meat behind them other than just little snippets that are being in army books. And the fact that we can flesh them out more, we know a little bit more of their personality. I mean, you read Pride of the King and you don't think Garrick has the personality that he does in that book. I mean, just knowing, you think he's the stoic kind of like military hardened. He's always just been mocked of his entire life because of the boons and all that stuff. But the characterization in the book, he's not that jaded kind of person. He's actually got a little bit upbeat. He's got a little bit of positivity to him. He's got a little bit of optimism, which is surprising. With Bannock, he's a lot more. I don't know the right word to it. He's a little bit more on the looser, crazy side than I anticipated. With envisioning, he's having daydreams of a woman that he'd never met before, that he's just read diaries of, and he's interpreted how she is and looks, the red hair side of things. So it's lovely just seeing these characters evolve and change, and I'm really hoping that some of these characters go beyond this trilogy, and also we just keep developing them. I think the joys of these stories, you can go anywhere in the world. We can go back in time. We can get an origin story of any of these characters as well. Yes. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stay in the modern timeline. That's the joys of the fantasy novels. Exactly. So is there anything that we haven't mentioned yet in Argument Stone that you want to highlight? Because it's hard to talk about these things in a spoiler-free kind of bubble.
It's true. Especially where it's a sequel.
Exactly, especially at sequel, especially how there is, now that I've got like ideas in my mind of what actually takes place, if you spoil them, I won't get in trouble. So I'll
take the heat for that.
You take the heat for that anyway. So yeah, is there anything in particular, anything you added, any kind of theme, anything that you wanted to highlight?
So a big theme that I wanted to explore in this book was redemption, the concept of redemption, and what is possible and when is it required even, and who decides what redemption is. And I'm hoping that a lot of the emotional beats that are surrounding that match up, right, with kind of the ideas that we're putting in there. Because there's a lot of like societal trauma is a thing, as we're witnessing in the world today. Societal trauma is a thing, and also individual trauma. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference where one of those ends and one of those begins and the other begins. And so that was one thing that I really wanted to explore with this, because you have all of these characters that are forcibly being forced to confront their societal expectations, whatever those are. From you've got Yorna, who is now facing the consequences of, helping Sverri in the last book and the rest of her clan and all of that kind of stuff, and her kind of having to step up and then make decisions as a new commander, essentially, because everybody's kind of looking to her, even though she's not necessarily the next one that's in line for that command, right? And then you have Herneas, who's there and is dealing with Sverri, who is also in a very impossible situation where he's trying to live up to the expectations of a hero of the Free Dwarves, but he's also trying to keep everybody alive, and there's these two levels of expectations, and something's got to give, right? And then you've got Rorden dealing with, what is his legacy, right? How does he...
His family drama.
Yeah, his family drama, because there's a lot, right? There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, and I mean, this is my perspective, but obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong. This, if you say last book was a free dwarf kind of back and forth, I would say this book is more heavily dwarf rather than free dwarf. I think it's got a lot more, it's more directed towards, say, dwarf than free dwarfs. If you kind of look at Pride of the King, compare it, I would say the Pride of the King was definitely more weighted towards free dwarfs. I think this book is more weighted towards dwarf.
Imperial dwarfs?
Dwarfs, that is, in general.
Yeah.
That's my perspective.
I definitely think that it depends on which side you're more invested in. I think that there are definitely, I would say...
I mean, there's still free dwarfs in the dwarf story, but I would say if you were going to say the two factions, the dwarfs, you could say faction, you could say in the south, there's a lot more that goes on in the south than in the north.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Because you do have the two storylines.
Without spoiling
it's hard to talk about it. I'm like, how do I address that one? I think it's I would say there are definitely a lot of themes that are addressed, and I feel like the heaviest emotional toll comes from the Imperial side, potentially. I would say, because there are two storylines that we're following. We are following like Sverri and Herneas in the north, and we're also following like Bannock and Rorden and Garrick in the south and their situation. And so there are interactions between both of them, and there are heavy consequences for both factions, all three factions, with the Abyssal Dwarves thrown in there. There is a lot that happens in this book that affects all three. I would definitely say that the biggest, I would say some of the biggest emotional punches are probably with the Imperials. But I think there's discussion, and that there's that impact on both Free and Imperial and Abyssal, even things to make you ask questions for them, even. So it's hard for me to.
I mean, what makes a good book sometimes is just if there's a good discussion that happens afterwards. And I think this is one of those ones that you could have a really good discussion about all this stuff. So we'll probably leave that kind of discussion for another time.
I will. Here, let me try one more time to sum it up. I would say I think it's interesting that you chose the Imperials, because that tells me what part of what themes were probably more relevant to you, and so therefore felt like it was more important to you, perhaps. And I think that somebody else reading it might pick it up and think, well, yeah, there's some Imperial Dwarf stuff, but did you see what happened here with the Free Dwarfs? Yeah. And so,
I mean, Free Dwarfs is my favorite out of the two. So they are my favorite, but I don't know. I think maybe I just love the different clans and all that stuff, which you get a lot more of.
And that could be
we know a lot about the Free Dwarf clans. We don't know too much about, what happens in the south and all those clans. Yeah. There are a lot of them, but we know of only a few.
I definitely would say there's more world building for the Imperial Dwarves than there is for the Free Dwarves. Just because the Free Dwarfs are still trying to get everything organized, because they're still split between two continents, essentially, or two significant, locations. And so they're still trying to get all their stuff together, whereas the Imperial Dwarves are like, oh, crap's about to hit the fan kind of thing. So we need to take care of this. So.
And their leader is an Abyssal Dwarf, which they don't know yet, but we'll guess we'll find out the hard way of what happens there. Okay. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm trying to think if we've covered all our bases here. I guess we'll go into the other book. Like, where can people get it? Because I know that it was last update I had. It was sent away to the printers to get printed out. So what's the status of the book?
So Argument of Stone is scheduled for the printers to be in the warehouse, is what I was told, on the 13th. Now, that's barring any additional hiccups or printer errors or anything along those lines, or a sudden meteor storm or something like that's causing delays or whatever else is slated to happen.
What's
this
happening
year
in America at the moment, man? God, you got media stores happening now.
Right. We don't have enough time. There's not enough time in this podcast. But that's when it's due to be in the warehouse. That it's supposed to be in the warehouse on the 13th. So I imagine going out from there shortly thereafter, hopefully in everybody's hands by the end of November. And as soon as it's in the warehouse and is being shipped out to the distributors and all that kind of stuff, I imagine the ebook will be available shortly thereafter. So if you really just can't wait, you can jump on that. And I think by the end of the month, plenty of time to get your holiday reading in, kind of thing, at the end of the year. So you should have it well before Christmas and all of that kind of stuff.
And I do suggest getting the ebook from the Mantic store, because Mantic have changed. They're really lore focused now, which is really, really great. But one added thing is, if you actually look up the army on the Mantic website, it will come up with the books that are relevant. So if you look up Dwarfs right now, you'll get Honor's Price, you get Pride of the King, and you can buy it digitally. And if you buy it through Mantic, they will see those numbers. I mean, they don't see it if you buy it through Amazon. they obviously hear from Brandon, from Wendy Star of sales and how well things are going, but this is raw data for them. And if they see someone buying an army plus buying the book, they go, oh, okay, the book is helping us get this material out there. So definitely, if you have the opportunity, get the book through the website. And I know they're selling the physical copy of Stand at Callinspire. I know that's more of a tester to see, hey, if people are interested, let's start to stock the other books. So definitely support it where you can. If not, get it off Amazon, because that does help it push it up the charts. But if you prefer the ebook, you can definitely get it from the Mantic website. And what Ben actually told me just before this is they're actually doing an audio version, because we've already got the audio version for Steps of Deliverance. But I understand, Ben, you're doing an audio version yourself as well. Doing the audio version for Drowned Secrets. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. We've finished recording it. We may have to go back and make like some final like edits on it. But I feel like it's in a pretty good place that we're getting ready to I've sent it over to Wing to Sar. They're looking at getting it distributed, all that kind of stuff. It's into its final stages of getting approved and sent out. Be on the lookout for it. I'll talk to Brandon and see if we can't send you guys over a bit of a sample of it. I do all the narrating and the reading and the voices, so you can make fun of my accents and how they, kind of change, because who knows what a Neridican actually sounds like. Evidently I do, and it changes, but no, it doesn't change that much. I feel like it's a pretty good one. Of course I'm biased, but we also got a sound editor in there, so that they've added it's almost more of like an audio drama in the way that we did it, with like sound effects and some light music and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to see what people think of it, and hopefully all the people that are clamoring for more audiobooks will latch onto this and will buy it and will let us know that you want more of them, because I'm willing to do more of them, because it was a pretty fun process. The thing of it is that right now there just isn't the data to back up a want or
the justification,
the justification of doing them. They take more effort than writing a novel almost in many cases, or at least more hands within that within that pie to get it done. And so if you want more audiobooks, the best way that you can do that is go and buy some. Go and buy Steps to Deliverance, read it, leave a review, interact with it, just like with any content creator on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the case may be. If you like what they're producing, if you like what's being produced, comment on it. And even if it's just a 3-star or give a star review, 3 to 5 stars. If it's less than that, no, go away. But preferably,
try not to give it a star. Let's avoid that. If you're listening to this and you give it a star, you're kind of on the dick side of things. Don't do that.
I mean, you do you, and I'm not going to tell anybody that you can't do anything. But please, keep it in mind. Also, the more 5 stars we have, the more the algorithm pushes it, right? It's weird that 4 stars is almost like a negative for the algorithm. It's weird. There's a whole bunch of stuff with that, but leave a review, interact with it, comment on it.
Yeah, what Brandon actually mentioned in an interview we did I think a couple of weeks ago, is that Amazon actually now judge it based off social media rather than actually the sales of the book. So if you can share it on your Facebook, tag it, stuff like that, just get it out there. I mean, I think I've interviewed the majority of authors that have done the Pannithor stuff, and every single one of them has a huge passion of this universe that's been created. Yourself, Ben, we spoke pretty early on when I think we did a Pride of the King interview with Countercharge at one time. But I mean, Scott Washburn, Mark Barber. I mean, every single one of them I've spoken to, and Clint, I keep thinking of them, Clint. There's Mike Rossi as well. They're just so passionate about Kings of War, and you see that in the writing and the fact of Mantic is allowing fans essentially to help build this world. Absolutely. Is very unique and rare, and should be definitely nurtured and encouraged. Most importantly, you don't want a situation where the company is deciding what people should like. The people should be deciding what we should be writing about and talking about and listening to. So if we do get a snippet of that, I will slice it in right now.
Magdalene shifted uncomfortably, unsure as to how he should react. Humans were so volatile. Their emotions raged like a storm, crashing against the rocks and leaving him to feel as though he were a small ship left adrift in the midst of the tossing waves. He preferred the company of his fellow placoderms, with their stalwart and stoic presence to bolster him up and remind him of his duty. "I am sorry for your sadness," he ventured. Larine turned her reddened eyes on him. "Thank you," she smiled through her tears. "It feels good to tell someone about it." Magdalene nodded at this and then turned as if to leave. "But," the sister spoke before he could walk away, "I'm afraid I cannot repay your kindness, at least not in a way that would be worthy of you. For you see, you are one of my sins." Larine lifted her hand and a bolt of energy flew from her fingers to slam against Magdalene, who grunted with pain and went flying into a shelf, crushing the wooden plank and causing the books to rain down on him as he slid onto the dirt floor, dazed. Ashal screamed. Larine lowered her hands and began to chant in a strange language. Mist-like tendrils of power seeped out of her hands and writhed into the ground beneath her, causing the earth to tremble. One of my earliest discoveries in my excavation here was a strange book that told the most inconvenient truths. Larine stopped her chanting and closed her eyes in concentration, the tendrils of power still leaching into the ground from her closed fists. "It taught me the ways of power and the lies of eternity. At first I didn't want to believe, but then I began to look at the advantages the book offered. It taught me the ways of the dead and how to bring them back." Ashal screeched again as a skeletal hand punched its way free from the hard-packed earthen walls in the tunnel outside of the room, and watched in horror as a body pulled itself free from the dirt, shaking off debris as it did so. Ashal edged back further into the room. "At first I thought to use the dead only as a means of excavating the lost city. They didn't need to breathe, and surely this was no evil purpose that I was using my power to accomplish." Larine leaned back and seemed to grimace as more energy rushed out of her and into the dirt. More undead creatures began to pull themselves free from the earth. Magdalene, still dazed from her earlier attacks, worried indistinctly as to whether the tunnels could stand this much disruption. "Now, however, I have come to the realization that our society is flawed. Our memories are too short, and we forget where we have come from." Larine lowered her head as the last of the power left her clenched fists and entered the dirt beneath her. "The hegemon does not serve the people or the gods. He is a foolish man who forgets the poor and the needy and leads his own people on hopeless and pointless campaigns against those he claims are our enemies. When the Abyss and the Orcs and the evil Northmen rage across our lands, he does not care for his people and he does not serve a higher purpose." Magdalene shook his head to clear his vision and pushed himself to his feet. He pulled his spear out of its strap, holding it to his back, and rushed over beside the young Ashal, who stood trembling and petrified. He counted about a dozen skeletons that stood between them and the exit into the tunnels. Behind them, Larine took a step forward and almost fell, clutching the edge of the table and pushing herself up with a grimace. The giant placoderm took up a defensive stance against the undead minions and stabbed with his spear at the closest one. The sharp point punctured through the exposed eye socket of the first skeleton, and the creature stepped back under the force of the blow. But as Magdalene brought his spear back in preparation for another attack, the undead creature once again began its forward advance. He switched his stance to a series of efficient motions, his spear stabbing in a steady rhythm of pinpoint thrusts. Magdalene grunted. The precision of these strikes that he normally used to fight within the heavier confines of underwater combat struggled to find killing blows against the already decayed bodies of his current opponents. The first skeleton finally succumbed when one of Magdalene's thrusts took its head from its shoulders, and he repeated this measure with the next one, also managing to drop this opponent. But the rest of the animated skeletons continued their shuffling attack and threatened to overwhelm him. A quick glance behind showed that Larine was still recovering from the effects of whatever spell she had cast. Magdalene pulled a shawl behind him and backed further into the room as more skeletons appeared from out of the darkness of the tunnels. There were far too many for him to defeat. They would soon crowd in and tear both him and Ashal to bits. Magdalene lunged forward and stabbed his spear at Larine, who twisted desperately to the side, narrowly missing the point of the weapon. Magdalene quickly followed up with a series of blows, but she turned and fled behind the advancing wall of skeleton warriors that continued to shamble into the room. "Surrender! If you do, I promise I will not hurt you or the child unless it becomes necessary.
Yes.
But if you didn't hear anything, it means there's no snippet. So there's my cut. I'm going to write down that time. So if there was a cut and you got a snippet, congratulations. I delayed this long enough for it to come out. But if not, I'm sure we'll slice it in maybe with a spoiler review later down the line. But either way, well, thanks heaps for coming along, Ben. I'm sorry for the disjointedness of everything.
That's my
I can't wait to. I can't wait until we get into Argument of the Stone a lot more and talk about the spoilers. You can see me on camera and you know my smirk when I'm trying to subtly hint towards something, and there's a lot we can talk about. And I can't wait to talk about one particular event that happens, which I will not spoil. But once that happens, I'll be interested to see whether anyone's going to have any issues with it, because it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
But we'll leave it there. So thanks heaps for coming along, Ben, and I really
absolutely
do appreciate it.
anytime. I look forward to the next time.
Bye.
See you. Bye.
Yeah.